Good evening.
And
We'll begin our discussion, our reading tonight, remembering that Gamaliel was invited after Stephen's judgment to go to Wade's house. He was invited by Peter, Simon Peter, so he would know the work that was had been carried in that place. Gamaliel not only received the emissary in a gentlemanly fashion, but showed great interest and accepted it with magnanimity. With the arrangements set, the wise rabbi entered the poor house. Simon Peter, profoundly respectful, explained the purposes of the institution. Peter kindly offered him a copied parchment of all Matthew's annotations. Gamaliel graciously thanked the ex-fisherman, treating him with the deference and consideration of an equal. When they arrived at the long infirmary where all the sick were lodged, the great rabbi of Jerusalem could not hide his feelings and was moved to tears. On sheltering beds, he saw elderly people with hair made white by the winters of the life, and the squalid children whose grateful eyes followed Peter's shadow as if they were in the presence of a father. He had not walked 10 steps around the simple, clean furniture when he stopped in front of an old, miserable looking man. The poor man seemed to recognize Gamaliel. Simonius, you are here? Asked Gamaliel in wonder. You actually left Caesarea? Oh, it's you, sir, replied the old man with tears in the corner of his eyes. Who is in possession of your Samarian properties? Asked Gamaliel. Ah, sir, like after a long pause in which Simonius seemed to be collecting his thoughts, he wiped his tears and continued. Like Job, I saw my body rotting amid the comforts of my home. The Lord, in his wisdom, had reserved great hardships for me. I was denounced a leper, and in vain I asked for help from the children whom the Creator gave me in my youth. They all forsook me. The friends who used to dine with me in Caesarea fled. One day, to my utter despair, the executors of justice came, my children were to take possession of all my possessions and money, which represented all my hopes for an honest old age. They took me to the valley of the unclean, where they left me as if I were a criminal. I felt such loneliness and hunger that I fled the valley of lepers and made the long journey on foot. So we see in this moment that the great Rabbi Gamaliel, while was knowing the house of the way with Simon Peter, met a friend of him that was on the day a rich man in Caesarea. His name Simonius. He was diagnosed as a leper, and then they sent him to the valley of the lepers. He was he was totally despair. I fled the valley of lepers and made the long journey on foot in hopes of finding in Jerusalem the vowed friendships of the past. So he fled that valley and came to Jerusalem. The old master, Gamaliel, had been honored in his home while passing through Caesarea, and he was now shocked because Gamaliel remembered how happy was that old man Simonius. After a short silence, Simonius followed his narrative. Soon my wounded feet could no longer walk. I dragged on as best as I could, overcome with fatigue and thirst, when a poor cart driver felt sorry for me, picked me up, and brought me to this house where suffering finds fraternal comfort. Gamaliel did not know how to express his amazement. Simonius was really a very rich man, and now was in that place as an anonymous man between other and sick men and children in the home of the way. Peter was equally moved. You see how beautiful it's that describing of Peter's attitudes, accustomed to practicing the good without ever thinking about the patient's past. He saw in Simonius' case another consoling display of Christ. We see here the, that Emmanuel tells us that even Peter didn't know about the past of many of those who he helped in name of Christ. That is the beauty, because eh, because Simonius didn't tell his story yet to Peter. The great rabbi could not hide his grateful friendship, but with no resources to take him out of their poor shelter, he extended his gratitude to Simon Peter. You see, even Gamaliel wanted to take Simonius out of that place to a better place, but he couldn't. Only now did he realize that the Judaism had not thought of these loving places of rest. He considered the heartbreaking possibility of having to send a loved one to the valley of the unclean. He had recommended such recourse to so many people. He now had to consider the situation of this dear friend. You see that he, Gamaliel, did not know how was the feeling of having a lovely friend sent to the valley of the unclean. I would ask for a pause of 10 minutes. May it be, Aline?